your body, feel the rhythm groove. Feet moving, your body turn into a wave.
So good evening everyone, or the morning for our American or Asian friends. Tonight, as requested by a few people, we're taking a deeper dive into the new trend profit indicator and its overlay version that gives you the nice flags. You might have seen it recently in a couple of signal streams that I have been putting out. So let's open it on the screen quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain all the components of this indicator. It are quite a bit of things combined, and I'll not do that. I'll take a look at the overlay version that is essentially the same indicator, but it just gives you flags on certain conditions overlaid on the price. So that's the plan for tonight. In the next stream, somewhere in the coming week probably, I'll do some pick up some random charts and see how we can fine-tune the settings and trade this trend profit indicator. So let's start at the different components here quickly, and I'm just going to disable the bunch so we can start with a bit more clear overview. I'll leave these setups, otherwise I'm busy clicking for a half hour putting them all down. There and there. So this is a bit cleaner, there's a bit of noise still. One of the main components of the trend profit indicator is these numbers below. That's the Ton-D-Mark sequential count, very famous indicator, and a lot of very wealthy people made their money just trading the nines on the higher time frames on the stock market. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in the trend in the Ton-D-Mark TD sequential. I did other zooms about it if you are interested. But essentially the basic is if you get an 8-9, that means that it's a completed selling cycle, and there's a good chance that the current selling cycle is over, and there's a chance it will reverse, either go sideways or start a new selling cycle. So those are the three options. But it's a very good area of usually the 9 plus 4 candles after. It's an area of time where reversals often occur, and this is very predictive. It's not like 99% of all the other indicators that gives you a lagged signal of historical price action, moving averages and stuff like that, but it's actually predicting purely based on price action when there's a potential reversal. So we're using the setup counts here, and you see the 8s, the 9s. When there's a 9, you see that white background. That's the potential reverse zone where the buy or the sell cycle is over. Here you see a buying cycle that's over. Here you see a selling cycle that's over. So that's an area of very high interest when you're trading, because it is often the place where things turn around. You also see these floating a bit higher 13s, and those are TD sequential is made of setup phase and a countdown phase, and these are the countdown completions. So I don't trade them at the moment much. I think they're a bit more relevant for stock markets and indexes, and a bit less okay for crypto, but I did put them in just in case, because it does give a very high time frame indication of the trend. So that's the bottom bar that we have here. In the middle we have the trend momentum oscillator, one of my own inventions, and that gives you the not necessarily the strength, but more how much mass, how much volume, how much impactful the trend currently is. So when you see a very high wave to the upside, then there's a pretty strong, there's a lot of push to push the price higher. It doesn't necessarily, but there's a lot of effort. I think that's the best word. The trend momentum is the effort being done by traders to move the price. Just 1 second. So, trend momentum indicator gives you the effort being put into a trend. Here you see a lot of effort was put in to push the prices higher, and then that effort was declining over time, even went a bit negative, and then you see a bigger wave when there was more effort to the downside than to the upside. One of the strongest things on trend momentum is the divergences. Those are very, very powerful indication, and you will see the trend momentum divergences being painted as the red or the green lines, but also here as the open squarish symbols. It's not a square, but I don't know the English name for that at the moment. So these signs, when they're open, it's trend momentum divergence. So that's the effort being put in. Then I'm going to quickly hide the trend momentum and go to another invention of mine. So this is these bar patterns are the relative strength delta. It's essentially the difference between an RSI of length 7 and 14. So what this tells you, that is the speed of movements, because you can also see that very high bar instantly drops to a lower one. It's like an early warning sign that the relative strength is increasing or decreasing relative to higher or lower time frames. So it's often at the start of a move you'll see a big jump in the relative strength delta. I disabled one thing too many, I think. Oh, there we go. See if we can find some divergences. Yeah, we can. So to make it a bit clear, I noticed with a lot of backtesting that the relative strength divergences are also a very good signal that things might be turning around. And to distinguish them from the trend momentum, what is in red and green, I gave them the purple and a light blue color. See if I can find a bullish one. They're pretty rare on the higher time frames. Oh, there we go. Purple and orange. Those are the divergences for the relative strength delta. So, because these can be a bit crowded in the middle, you see these divergence icons. When they're solid, they're from the relative strength delta, and when they're open, they were for trend momentum. So that's just a convenient way to spot the divergences on the indicator. Keep in mind, divergences are based on price pivot points, and it takes a few candles to detect the pivot. So this divergence is only detected 1, 2, or 3 candles after. And actually, if you go to the settings, these are the relative strength delta settings, you see that the look back period is 2 candles. So it takes 2 candles for the indicator to detect a price pivot and to measure if there's a divergence or not. So there's always a delay in divergence in this way. Same setting is in trend momentum. That's by default on 1, I think, because that's a bit more less choppy as the relative strength delta, so that has one tick delay. You can trade those divergences already, especially trend momentum, but I think as confirmation, as extra weight to another signal, they're much more useful. So how to look at this relative strength delta, it's really like an early warning sign that things are moving quite fast. So it's a very quick moving oscillator, while the trend momentum is a more slower and steady indication. So that's why if you see that the trend momentum or the relative strength delta is flowing, you have to like watch it as an average or something like this, because it can be very choppy. So here you see a nice move to the upside, some dip here, but it's an early warning sign, so that's why they are quite choppy and moving fast, and they're not averaged out in any way. So let me enable the trend momentum back, so the divergences make a bit more sense. So here you see a nice example. Let's take a look at the price. We're on the daily chart, by the way, at the moment. So here you see the bars of the relative strength delta having a peak, slowly fading away, having a lower peak, fading away, and then jumping back down. And as you see in the price, this was the first peak, a bit of sideways, and the sideways period instantly makes this fall back below. It's not a sell signal on its own. As you can see, it's just some sideways, some movement downward, some small retrace. And it happened here again. And then you see we have one candle going down, like after a very weak up candle, so that's already a sign that, okay, this could be getting a bit nasty over here, because there's like a strong divergence on the way that is going. And not all divergences are detected, but you see the divergence here. You have 3 lower highs on the relative strength delta, while you have higher highs on the price, and that's an indication that this uptrend is weakening, and voila, it was the big pullback of January last year. Trend momentum also picking it up, but it's a bit slower, obviously, because the momentum is the effort put in to put the price higher was declining rapidly, and that just went choppy sideways, didn't go really far down yet. So quickly look at another example for that relative strength. Here also in this triple topish from March, April and May on the daily, you see here we still made a higher high. We made a lower high, very strong divergence. It's also being registered here at the by the indicator, the divergence, and then we also had the same divergence on trend and momentum. Not all divergences can be picked up automatically, so the human eye is still much better than the software can give us. So we had a nice divergence here on trend momentum and on the relative strength delta. You saw relative strength delta on this candle already dropping to, I think, to pretty much 0, and then going steeply down. Trend momentum following the last push up. The last push up also got trend momentum divergence, while the relative strength was already very weak here. So very typical for a small relief rally back up before continuation for the downside. That's a very clear sign here. This was still proper islands of relative strength here in all these peaks up. And here we had some small choppiness, barely any relative strength delta, and that was just before the big drop there. So relative strength delta and trend momentum is a really powerful combination with the divergences, and looking at, like, is this a real recovery at this moment in time? You wouldn't know. Or is this just a small relief rally, retrace and continuation? And the relative strength delta was a very clear example. Here you see the same behavior. You had the peak with a very solid relative strength delta. Then you had some really small choppy relative strength delta here on this recovery peak, and then it just continued further down. And the interesting thing is, I don't know if you noticed that if you look at the white background from the TD sequential, this one was called perfectly. Really, really amazing. You had trend momentum divergence, you had the 8-9s, the buying cycle is over, and then you have your potential reverse zone, and in that reverse zone you see the trend momentum dropping, the relative strength dropping very steeply. So this candle, you knew that the chance for some downside was very high. So if you would have taken it the end of that candle, waiting for it to be confirmed, you could have almost 10% small relief rally, and then back to 14%. So same in the other direction. You see the 9 here, the perfect 9, entering the potential reverse zone. You see trend momentum reversing in the zone. There are no supporting divergences in this case. Just checking if the indicator was right. Yeah, no supported divergences, but a very solid trend momentum reversal inside the potential reverse zone. But no divergences to support it, and that's why there was some upside move, still another 10%, but in the larger scale of things it was not a very strong move for the daily. And there were also no supportive divergences like we had here. Sideways periods are always difficult, and I think it's doing a pretty good job. Looking at this chart here, you see a potential reverse zone. The 8-9s, the selling cycle has ended, but you also see a gap in the count here. That's very interesting phenomena in this version. You see the 8-9, but there's a gap here, and that pretty much tells you that the selling cycle has ended, but no buying cycle started, but also not a selling cycle has started. And then you go into a bit of choppy sideways period of nothingness over here. You also see trend momentum being very shallow in these times. So these gaps in the TD sequential, they don't happen really often, but they do happen, and then it's just a waiting period to see, will a new buying cycle or new selling cycle begin, or are we still in the sideways chop? So keep an eye on those gaps. It can be a very nice very nice clue. So the teamwork of trend momentum and relative strength delta is very, very solid things. Relative strength delta is the early warning sign. The trend momentum is how much effort is putting in. And there's a third component for the trend analysis that I will enable now. And it's the trend strength line. You'll see this blue line here. Wait, I'm just going to reset to defaults. I hope my voice is keeping up tonight. It's not that bad. So you see this blue line, and that is pretty much the trend strength. And you see sometimes it is in a red zone, like overbought, oversold, and that will tell you that the trend is in on levels that it's usually getting exhausted. If we look at some nice examples, here on the daily chart we had this famous triple peaks again, this famous triple top from beginning last year. You see that the trend is consistently high, 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 and it even in this relatively sideways period it kept in an uptrend, and once there's a solid downtrend it can drop within a candle from highly positive to highly negative, like here. And the areas of interest are obviously when it's in overbought or oversold, but it can be, as you can see, in these areas for a very long time. The interesting parts are when you see a sudden move, a steep curve in the trend strength. Like here you saw sideways, 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 and here it started to slowly drop, and here it dropped further, and here even though the price was going up a bit, there's also a small delay. But these hooks and these curves are interesting. As soon as you see here it's flat, 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 here it started to, in this candle it started to curve downwards. I don't know if you can see that clearly. And that's when it's also exiting. So when it's curving, it's a good idea of trend reversal, and when it's exiting the overbought or oversold areas, then it's a clear signal. Here at the bottom also, I'm just going to enable values quickly, so you can see this blue number here that says 43 now is the trend strength. So here we were on minus 69 for a long time, and here we had a very slight curve up in this period, and that's also when, even though the price was declining, the trend was still flat. There's no real trend, it's just price decline, and here we saw the price recovery with the trend reversing to the upside. Here we had a bit of a steeper one. We went into an uptrend. Obviously the uptrend got exhausted a bit, had a pullback, but not that far below zero, so it's more likely a pullback than a real trend reversal, because the trend strength was still in the up zone. We entered the overbought territory, the trend exhaustion, where we did have some curving down, but not really any steep decline. And then here we had a very sharp hook on these candles already. And here you see the predictive power of the trend strength line. Now if I just, this candle was still high, and this candle we dropped from 97 to 82, so quite a substantial drop in price. And if we mark the candle, that was on this candle here. And the funny part is it was still a green candle, but the trend exhaustion, the trend strength was dropping very steeply all of a sudden, and that's a very good signal that there might be a trend reversal. The trend reversed on that point, and price declined while the trend was still in the same levels. Then it started dropping again, and then after dropping so far, the trend resets into a downtrend, entering oversold territories here, going flat, 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 even though we had a bit of a bounce here, but still going down. And only here in this period you see the trend recovering a bit. It was a bit of downside, but we're also still in the oversold territories. And what I liked about this candle is that we exited. We were almost exiting the overbought entry. So there was a quite steep jump here. The jump was much less, and obviously the price was not instantly reversing, but on the daily chart it still looks like we are going into an uptrend based on the trend strength. We also see, just skipping to the current time while we're at it, trend momentum reversing here nicely, and the relative strength delta is also making a quite nice jump up, but it's not on proper levels. We do want to see the next candle like being around 20s and a candle afterwards being like 30s. That would be healthy jumps in the relative strength delta. So we covered the trend momentum, how much effort is being put in, the relative strength delta, what's the speed of things, your early warning sign, and we covered the trend strength with trend exhaustion. And the latter one is a bit hard to grasp in the beginning because it behaves completely different than all the other oscillators. But it's very nice to see here. You got these areas continuing being in the overbought territories, but the areas were getting smaller and lower and smaller and lower, and finally the trend was really ready to reverse. And even though we had a relief rally here, the trend strength, the strength was out of the trend, and it reset it into measuring the downtrend. So it's not the typical oscillator. You have to get used to reading it a bit, but it's a very solid indication of trend reversal. Every time frame though, you want to tune what level is the trend exhaustion. So the higher the time frame, you might want to drop it a bit lower. Like for instance, if we drop it to, let's say, probably 70 is a good point. We go to the trend exhaustion settings, 70 on the high, and you see that this is essentially one big overbought zone with the parabolic rally resetting fully, and here you have the steep hook back on that recovery, and it flipped into an uptrend. So points of interest, as said, sharp hooks in the overbought, oversold territories, crossing the zero with a very steep line like here and here, like flipping from an uptrend that might recover to, no, there's a solid downtrend, exits from overbought, oversold, and curves in. So when it's exiting properly, the oversold like here, or it's properly exiting here, that's also a point of interest. Now, you might have noticed the stars. Let me just clean it up a bit. These stars that you see happening in the TD sequential reverse zones, those are when there's a trend flip, that's how I like to call it. And it's, let's get a nice example. Here's a decent example. And that is when the trend momentum is reversing direction while inside a potential reverse zone, and then you get the star symbol as a trend flip. So that's just to combining those two parameters, those two signals, and they're doing pretty good. Not always, like here we have been into a bit of choppy zone. The first star, yeah, did work out for like 10%. Then we had a bit of a drop again. The second star also worked out probably, yeah, 7-8ish%. So definitely tradable. This one here was pretty good. It did take a bit of time, but you did see the trend momentum going up and the relative strength delta going up nicely in this period. So in the end, it was a very solid trade. This one here also, well, in this crazy uptrend, it did give you a 5% reverse. This one also, let's see, 2.5. Also like 4.5 indication of this pullback here. So a weird indicator, you have to get some feeling for it, but it's definitely something worth looking at. Now the only thing I have not mentioned so far, I think, is these bars at the top. Here you see some circles, some triangles up and down with a number above it, and that's a bit of work in progress. How you have to read the current version is when they're green, it probably means we're flipping direction. Let's see if I can find some red examples. So here we were mild down, slowly up, down, and here we went to a green. So like it's trying to call a bottom, and it's just a score given from all the other indicators on this screen combined. And here it called a top, a local top, whilst it was in a downtrend. Yep, definitely a downtrend. Some red and orange stars, and the downtrend continued. So don't look too much at the details here. Also here, nice top called. It looks like we're the top. It looks like we're at the top, and indeed it was pretty much the top. Here it could have been the top, but we got another last rally there, so it's not 100% accurate, but it's just like adding up all the different factors with a score count, but it's still a bit of work in progress, to be honest. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to this top bar. The other signs are, yeah, I think very, very solid. Just quickly looking at the chat. Hey Fishburne, hello there. Just quickly looking at the Discord. If there's any questions in the private Discord there. Not at the moment, alright. So you have been watching me stream maybe some signals based on this indicator, and that's the overlay version. It's just an interpretation of things going on in the trend profit that might be an entry or a confirmation. Yeah, sure, we'll look at that in a bit, Fishburne, the 30 minutes and 1 hour. So before we switch to the overlay and the signals, and then we'll switch time frames, I just want to quickly run through the settings. So we have the trend momentum settings, the green-red wave, the length, and some settings. This is an important one. How much delay will you accept in detecting divergences? But there's a cost of being the higher the look back right, the more candles it takes to make sure that it's a pivot, but obviously that adds delay to the signal. You can also disable the different types of divergences being plotted. You can, if you notice that hidden isn't just not working out for you on a certain asset, you can disable them. Trend exhaustion settings. Most important is, depending on your asset and time frame, what is the right level of overbought and oversold. And you just watch an asset history, and like in a very bullish asset, you might never drop below like 60 at all when it's just trending upwards and upwards. Like this whole period here, since 19, we have not been reached all the dots. We had a little dip here, but we've not been oversold at all, while we were overbought quite a lot of times. And these are just areas you want to fine tune. Like maybe really oversold for a bullish period like this might even be 90. So if we go to trend exhaustion, we say really overbought is 90 on this asset. And this looks a bit more accurate, especially if you're trading the exits of the overbought, oversold. So that's the only thing you really have to fine tune for the trend exhaustion. Trend momentum, I don't really fine tune anything on it, except when I go to an asset class like Forex. I might put this on 21 just to make it a bit less responsive, a bit more slow and steady. Gold also maybe 21, although recently I think 14 is doing just fine. So that's the only thing you might need to tune on trend momentum. Trend exhaustion, just play with the overbought, oversold levels and see how the chart looks on that, how accurate it is. It differs per time frame and per asset class mainly. For the rest, I'd leave it. Here also, for the relative strength delta, I wouldn't touch levels like this. The only thing you might want to change is the pivot detection for the divergences. From 1 is less delay but less accurate, and 2 or 3 is usually recommended. So that's pretty much all there is to tune. So it's not that crazy tuning 100 or dozen of parameters like we had with other indicators. It's not an indicator like that. The defaults are pretty spot on. So let's flip it to, let's do 1 hour. Go to current times. Obviously, sideways periods are pretty difficult, but they're easy to spot when with the trend momentum being quite small. We had a nice oversold period here that didn't really flatten out, and here it already started to curve upward slowly, and that correlates with the price pretty nicely. You see it exited the oversold area here, so that's on this candle. This candle we exited oversold. It's often a place of bottom, and we take the candle close of that. When it was confirmed, it would have given us a nice 2.88% move upwards. Interesting, and I really like it. Even though we had a pullback here and a small drop, the trend strength did not change at all, really. And it's just took a sharp hook to the upwards on this candle here. Let's see, on this candle here it took a sharp move upwards, and that's currently, I think, in play. It already almost, yeah, you could have made 1% already, but it's not. And that's just looking at the trend strength here. We had a trend flip. Like this divergence, it's being not called correctly because it's such a low pivot time. So that's one thing to keep in mind. In the end, it did play out for one candle, so it was not wrong actually. But yeah, it was too shallow to trade with. But we did have a very interesting trend flip here, where we are in the TD sequential 9 potential reverse zone. We have our trend momentum flipping direction here from down to up, and we also had trend momentum divergence as an extra confirmation, like yeah, this could definitely be an area where we reverse for a while. Relative strength delta was also pointing in the good direction. We did have a small pullback here, but if we would have entered on the trend flip, we would have had a pullback of let's see, 1%. But on the upside, we had 2.4%ish, and now having a bit of a pullback again. So this flip also, I don't know if I would have traded it because the trend momentum wave was very shallow here. So that's a very sideways period, which is very tricky. Those sideways periods really push the oscillators in weird directions sometimes because there's just no price action. So I might filter that. I might put it in option in the overlay to filter those areas out based on trend momentum signs. So this one is not really a valid star in my opinion. This one, yeah, it's a valid trend momentum flip, but you're still in oversold territories. So when in oversold territories, the chance that it's really going down a lot, it's not the biggest. So, and that's the way how I look at this indicator, combining those elements. Like what was a very solid one, love this one, I loved it, and I had signals on it there. What we have going on here, there was in the beginning of March, like 2 weeks ago, we were oversold for a long time in this sideways period. We ended the oversold with a trend momentum divergence here on this little peak and little valley in the sub-valley. We exited. It started to curve up nicely. We had a sharp curve here, and we exited on this candle. We did an exit of the oversold territories to the upwards. Trend momentum was nicely crossing, moving upwards. We had our early warning sign, relative strength delta, already firing, switching position here with a nice increase here. So that's your early warning here. It's starting to look good. Pay attention. You see trend momentum following, divergence on trend momentum, and the trend strength exiting. So that was definitely an area where a lot of good things combined, and that was a very solid move up. And lo and behold, at the top we had a very nice completed buying cycle here. The 9 was called. We went into a TD sequential gap when there's no buy cycle and no selling cycle started. That usually ends into a choppy zone, like 1, 2 down, 3 up, 2 up, 1 up. But in this potential reverse zone, we did see trend momentum reversing very nicely. So buying cycle completed. We're going to a bit of a choppy period. Trend momentum inside the potential reverse zone is triggered. We do have some more choppy sideways, but in the end trend momentum just kept dropping and dropping and dropping, and the price was following perfectly. Also, you see that in this period here, this period, the relative strength delta early warning signs were already firing. Trend momentum flipped to negative and we went down. And when did we stop going down? In the potential reverse zone of TD sequential, where we saw trend momentum reversing direction, and we went into the choppy sideways period that we are currently still pretty much in. So that's how I look at things. You want to confirmations, see what it's doing, you know the trend strength, you know the effort being put in. Like here, the trend momentum was a lot of effort being put in, and the price followed the effort very nicely. Perfectly called, buying cycle ended, some choppiness afterwards. I really love this picture. This is stuff where the indicator really shines out. Here another period just like here, you know, sideways, sideways, sideways. You had a nice buying cycle here that was completed with a gap. So the buying cycle was actually completed here. There were some people left over that probably jumping on the train a bit late. You have the exit of the overbought on this candle, and where you the exit on this candle actually. This candle we had the exit of the overbought. And on this candle, while still in that reverse zone, we had our trend momentum reversing direction. Not really yet any signs on the relative strength delta, so it was still pointing upwards, and only here we saw a steep decline in the relative strength delta on this candle. Well, if you want to see what goes afterwards, then really you had this dip in the trend strength, but it didn't cross to zero yet. It just went sideways, sideways, even got a bit of an increase here. But yeah, the trend momentum was continuing to be down. So there was more effort being put in to push the price down than there was effort putting in to push the price up. And you often see when trend momentum and the trend strength don't align, then you have this choppy sideways period where just finally in the end it's usually going into the direction of the trend momentum. You see more effort was being put in, more effort was being put in to push the price down. And finally, with this last push, they succeeded to drop the price pretty nicely. And watch and behold, a completed selling cycle here, trend momentum reversing. It looked really nicely, but in the end the trend strength was just going sideways, stabilizing after a very big TD sequential gap there, going sideways into the chop period, eventually dropping a bit into oversold territories, this whole area here, where we had that perfect reversal called, as we saw just in a bit. So this indicator really tells a story, and I'll try to make a nice infographic about it, summarizing what we did today. So now let's go to the 30 minutes just for fun. Just gonna toss out the drawings. To make things a bit more easier and to be able to set up alerts, I made an overlay version. Small differences. There are two filters added. A simple Hill moving average filter, that's this blue line, and ATR filter. Those I just added to be able to filter out flags. Same trend momentum settings. ATR settings are added, obviously. The same trend exhaustion settings. Just bring this to settings I like more for this time frame. Same relative strength delta settings, and here you can enable all the different flags and all the different signals that I put in so far. This might change. I might push some things out, might put some things additionally to it. So quickly looking at those signals, I do have filters off, right? Yeah, filters off. Quickly checking Discord if there's any questions. Nothing so far. All right. So enable TD. You see long flag dot TD. That's the signal type is trend momentum divergence. In shorts and in longs, there's a short one. We have our relative strength delta divergences. On the shorts, very nicely calling here, and a very nice call here at the bottom also. So that's the relative strength divergence, the RD flags. We have the trend flips. Those are the stars in the original oscillator version when inside a TD sequential potential reverse zone. It's getting complicated now. You have your trend momentum switching direction. Those are the flips. Very strong entry. We have trend momentum overbought and oversold. The trend exhaustion overbought, oversold, and that's when the trend exhaustion exits the overbought, oversold territory. See, I just have to, what settings am I here? Just to make it a bit more clear. 70 minus 70. I'll put the original one also on 70 minus 70, and I should have clicked OK here. 70 minus 70. There we go. So now you see that these red areas on the trend exhaustion are a red background on the overlay version. So that's in the overlay version you have the red background instead of this oscillator one. And the TE entries, the trend exhaustion entries, is when it exits the overbought or oversold areas. And then we have trend curve entries, when trend exhaustion is giving you a curve. Am I on both? Yep. So here you have a nice example, and it's just when you see a period of very straight line and all of a sudden it curves up, then you get the curve flag of the trend exhaustion. What else do we have? And overbought, oversold entries. Just waiting to. That's a bit more confirmed version of the exiting, overbought, oversold. So you can play around with that, see what entries work for you, what do you want to alert it on. There's some basic alerts in there, just long and short. For now it will be expanded in the next version one of these days. So whatever flag, bullish flag or bearish flag entry is enabled here, the flags and alerts, that's when the alert will trigger. But it will be expanded to include, so you can include different alerts and also have a generic alert that tells you what is firing. So that will be added pretty soon. Almost at my target of 1 hour, and I can just covered really the basics and all the different elements on there. So just quickly, the trend profit overlay as the trend profit is included with all VIP levels of TradeMentor. So with VIP 1 you already get both of these. I am working on a more advanced trader version where, just like Market Hyper Trader, you can set entries and confirmations, and where there's trade reports and stuff like that in. But it's not even in beta version yet. It's really a lot of work to be done on that. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of this indicator. I still have to publish some backtest results. And just just to show it's not only Bitcoin where it's working for, it's also things like gold where it's just doing magical things sometimes. But obviously your time frames are a bit longer. Also did a forex chart. Don't know if I can. I'll quickly try to find it. I did it for someone. I hope it loads. I always have some trouble loading. Well, in the stream, just an example for Euro USD. And if we just look at the previous period, and this was a very quick starting point chart, it's not properly fine-tuned. But this one, 6.5%. I think this one failed. Yeah, this would definitely hit your stop loss. This one, yeah, depends on your stop loss really, but it was right in the end, but it was just had another bit of a pullback afterwards. Not too shocking though. But you could have waited for a bit more confirmation on the relative strength delta if you were watching, but then some choppy sideways where it did try to flag some potential trend reversals that were very minor, more in a sideways action. But then, yeah, these shorts were absolutely nailing it. You probably would have exited somewhere here. So these last two shorts were really nailing Euro USD. Very solid ones. So as a very rough starting point, this is actually doing not bad at all, and you can just fine-tune your flags by enabling or disabling filters. You can just take a bit of a longer moving average or faster, or play with ATRs a bit. The blue line is the moving average, the red and the green lines here above and below the price are the ATR. Those who have been here a long time know it's a pretty strong indication of trend. So yeah, it's definitely, it needs some tweaking, but lovely short, great long, failed long. This short was okay. I think it worked out pretty nicely. So it needs some fine tuning. And what I would do, might fine tune this one in the next live stream about this indicator, where we just look at charts and fine tuning the flags for that. So just proving a point that it's even working on Forex, but just needs some fine tuning here. But still, I think with 1% stop loss you can probably get like nice decent couple of percentages profit. So nothing is 100% accurate in these markets. Yeah, just to give you an idea, we did do some back testing already on certain assets. Kai helped me out with that a lot. We've been testing like gold on all the signals, measuring them out, putting in Excel sheets so we can analyze them, just to give you an idea of the effort being put in backtesting and analyzing all that stuff. Here, Bitcoin on the 30 minutes, insane amount of trades we've been measuring out. There was the Bitcoin 4 hour, where we had some very lovely trades after the backtest. Like here, there's only 4 hour, 16% there. The next flag was a short again. Did kick in a bit late, but still 7%. Then we had that long flag that is pretty much, I think, still in play. Currently sitting at 2%. This short here went in a bit late. So you probably hit your stop loss there, but if you would have sit it out, because trend momentum was just going into the down direction still, could have made 4%. So yeah, these I have to probably filter out, because trend momentum was very small here. So those are the flags I still want to filter out. This one looked very valid, but just didn't really work out. It turned out to be a bit of a sideways period. So still, you can have a few small losses when you do catch moves like this. All right. Well, I'm past the 1 hour. I think I've dumped a lot of information on you guys already. Just take a look at it. I'll try to make a nice infographic in the coming days, summarizing a bit what everything does, updated to the last version. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are not in the VIP group but you want to try out this this indicator, just give me a private message and I'll give you 1 or 2 weeks access to the indicator, so you can have a play with it and see how much you like it or not. That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching, and be careful, take care, and safe trading. See you the next time.